Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Seth Williams and Jaron Barnes with the REtipster podcast. Today we've got an interesting character that we're interviewing. His name is Derek Gallimore. He has been in business for over 20 years and he's founded and bootstrapped two 8-figure businesses. He's also the founder of a company called Outsource Accelerator that specializes in helping small and medium-sized enterprises that are typically based in high-cost English-speaking countries like the U.S. Part of what they do is provide outsourcing assistance to businesses in the real estate sector. So today we're going to talk with Derek about some of the different roles and jobs that can be outsourced and how it improves the business process overall. Derek also gives us examples on how outsourcing can be applied to somebody like a real estate investor or a real estate agent or landlord, or whether they're just starting out or whether they've been doing this for a while. So personally, I'm excited about this conversation because I struggled for a long time to get my arms around this whole outsourcing thing. It's probably because I'm sort of a perfectionist and I have a really hard time letting go of certain tasks in my business. But honestly,
Not you, Seth.
Yeah, Jaron actually knows this better than anybody.
No way. Don't know what you're talking about.
I wondered if you'd smile when you heard that, but yeah, I mean, needless to say, though, I mean, my hesitancy to pull the trigger and to really, start allowing other people into my business and trusting others with the work has really cost me, honestly. And part of what bugs me about the whole conversation about hiring VAs or outsourcing work to other companies is, we've all probably heard the advice like, hey man, you're too busy working in your business. You just got to work on your business and outsource it to a VA. And the reason I don't like that is because that's a super oversimplified solution to the problem. It totally overlooks things like, okay, where do you find the right people? And how do you know when you're talking to a qualified candidate? And how do you know when you've got the right person for the job? And how much do you pay the person and what tasks should you be hiring for? There's all these little details that go into it that you kind of have to understand a lot of this stuff before you can even start going down that road. So when somebody just says, hey, go hire a VA, it's way more complicated than it sounds, at least in my mind it always was. So that's what I'm hoping to cover in this interview today. We're also going to talk about how outsourcing is not just limited to VAs. There's a whole world out there of professionalized outsourcing services, and Fortune 500 companies have been using these services for the past couple of decades, and only in the past 5 to 10 years have they started to become available to smaller size businesses like us. So ultimately, though, I think the great thing about outsourcing is that it has never been easier to find good, competent help at a cost that's surprisingly affordable. But as I mentioned, finding the right person doesn't just happen by itself. There's some stuff you need to know and understand before you can even start looking. So hopefully we're going to cover a lot of that today. So Derek, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Seth. And Jaron, that was an amazing intro. And yeah, I'm certainly super excited to discuss all of this.
Awesome. So just from your voice, I can tell you're not from the US, right? Where are you from?
That's correct. It's a little bit confusing, but I was born in the UK and then I was raised in New Zealand. And then as I sort of graduated college, I spent about 8 years in Australia. Then I spent about 8 years in London. And then I've been in Manila in the Philippines throughout the last 5 years. So a little bit of kind of crossing the globe. And also when I was setting up businesses in London, I was effectively commuting between Sydney, London, and Manila for that phase. So been doing a little bit of travel.
I've actually been working on my British accent over the past year or so. And the other night, my daughter said in kind of a rude tone that she wanted more dessert after dinner. And I said, can you try saying that a little bit more politely? And she just repeated the same thing in a British accent. So, I don't know.
It's actually really funny. My wife studied in Aberdeen in Scotland. And I've always said, no matter what you say when you have a British accent, no matter how insulting it is, it just sounds really quaint and really nice. Like you could be like, I'm going to hit you over the head with a frying pan. And it would sound like epic, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I
It is
actually hear
funny.
some.
Like people
It
say,
sounds.
like no one gets angry in London. And it's like, oh, I'm sure people do get angry, but it's just like kind of everyone's just happy.
So, Derek, to get this started, why don't you just start out by explaining in 30 to 60 seconds what is Outsource Accelerator all about? Like, what is it you guys can do to help the average real estate professional?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are like TripAdvisor for outsourcing. We don't actually outsource ourselves, but we provide all the information you need. We have videos. We have about 4,000 articles. We list about 630 outsourcing suppliers here in the Philippines. So we are the one-stop shop for getting you up to speed with outsourcing. And also we can help you select your outsourcing suppliers, and help you integrate. So it's about providing that platform and the interface to help you explore, learn about, and utilize outsourcing. So that's what we're about.
Okay, awesome. Oh, it's interesting. Now, a couple of years ago, I got a lot of education. I felt like I understood a lot more after I read a book by a guy named Chris Ducker. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a big name in outsourcing, the earlier sort of forms of outsourcing.
Sure. So his book is called Virtual Freedom, which, I mean, for me, it just helped me understand a lot of the basics of how this stuff works. And, when it comes to virtual assistants, I think that's kind of like, how his main business works. In his book, he talks about how there's like a few different kinds of VAs, or at least he classifies them. One is like the general virtual assistant who just kind of does a lot of like high level administrative stuff. There's a web developer. So like if you need a website built or developed, obviously that's what they do. There's also one for web marketing. There's content writers. There's audio and video editing, with the idea being that a VA is just a person. Like no one person is good at everything. You kind of have to understand specifically like where are the holes in my business, or what are the things that I'm just either not able to do at all or not able to do very well. Basically just hiring the appropriate person for the role that they're going to serve. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I would kind of introduce outsourcing as really just employment. Try not to think of it too different to just standardized employment when you hire your first or 100th person sitting in your office, except they're sitting remotely. And it's there's slight nuances because you have a slightly different culture, and also because you're managing them remotely as opposed to in the same room or office. But effectively, I would suggest just think of it as you would employment and kind of proceed that way. In terms of what can be done, again, I'm going fairly broad here, but I would put to you that anything that can be done in front of a computer, which is now most 99% of 99% of the business sectors can be done in front of a computer. So the range of skills now in outsourcing in the Philippines specifically is just so broad. And it's really just down to your imagination what can be done. I mean, I was having a look around one of our BPOs the other day. They had qualified naval captains literally navigating oil tankers in the open sea from an office in Manila. And they were also looking at optimizing, they were optimizing satellite dishes in Denmark for mobile phone reception. And as I was there, they were tweaking the angle by about 0.5%, half a degree or whatever to optimize the mobile signal in Denmark. So, you're really limited by your imagination and implementation in terms of what can be done.
Am I hearing that right? You're saying that somebody's driving ships in the ocean based on from an office in Manila? So there's no actual person on the ship, or at least that person driving it isn't on the ship?
Absolutely. I mean, I think now everything can be done because, and actually what they had as well, this company has about 50,000 staff, so they have relatively good facilities, as you can imagine, but they're very strong in the naval, which obviously isn't very relevant here. But, as an example, they have fully built out ship whatever they're called, decks and simulators, physical ship decks sitting within an office building in Manila, because you can then train there, and then you can be fully able to drive ships. I don't even know the right words for it, but everything now, and if you go onto a ship deck, everything is done, even though you're sitting on a ship in the ocean, everything is really done with a computer interface on that ship deck. And those computer interfaces then can be brought into the offices in Manila, doing the same thing. So the capacity now for outsourcing is just limited by your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
For those in our audience that are just starting out, because a large sector of our audience are people who have jobs that maybe they don't like or they do like, but it's just not their life isn't in their hands. They're not living out the freedom that they want to live. And what we teach is how to use real estate investing in order to start gaining some of that freedom and that financial control. When it comes to outsourcing, when you're bootstrapping and you're getting things started, a lot of people don't have a lot of money to hire people out. So what does it cost to start off like with, VA or employee number one using the services that you guys provide and that you specialize in?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a rough guide, look, salaries in the Philippines start at about 200 US per month. Okay, there are 650,000 university graduates or college graduates every year in the Philippines. And the median age is about 24 years of age. And it's the third highest or biggest English-speaking country in the world. So there is a huge pool of people here starting at about 200 US dollars per hour. I would suggest that the salary you start to pay so that you get someone that's university qualified with 2 to 3 years post-grad experience, they would be around the $400 to $500 per month mark. Okay, so incredibly affordable, and I think
will they be able to drive a ship for me?
Yeah, they probably wouldn't. You might need to pay about $500 or $600 a month for that, but yeah, you're getting up there.
But when I just think about, I think it kind of reminds me of that book, "The Earth is Flat." I think it was called. How does the economics of that work? If you have a huge, primarily English-speaking country with that many educated people, like, I don't know, like, why are they not? Right? Why are they not running the U.S. out of business? Like, I don't understand. Yeah. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, look, and because there are ethical concerns about this, we've done a white paper on outsourcing being a win-win. Look, the reality is that the Fortune 500s have been doing outsourcing and taking advantage of this salary arbitrage for about the last 20, 25 years, really since the point that technology made it possible. And when I talk about technology 25 years ago, we're really just talking about telephones. But now, since the internet has come along, internet bandwidth has, markedly improved, but also since infrastructure is so much cheaper, outsourcing is now available to the small and medium-sized businesses in the West, where previously it wasn't. Now, the thing is, a little bit like kind of hedge funds and tax avoidance that the big boys do, all of these tools are available to small and medium-sized businesses. And, you can really build a highly professionalized workforce at what is a very good salary for Filipinos, and these are bright guys. They are brought up now on a diet of YouTube, Netflix, NBA, and they're eating pizza and drinking Starbucks. There is very little difference. The coders, the developers, if they're keen, like any sort of coder is, they're on their computers. They're in the same forums as the kids in Silicon Valley. They are learning from the same online MOOCs as the kids in Silicon Valley. There is, and as you say, it's becoming the flat world. It's a globalized economy where this is one employment pool now. There isn't an employment pool of New York and the US and Europe. It is one globalized employment pool. And the opportunities there are just vast.
Are you familiar with a book called The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau?
No, I don't know that one.
So it's about, it's an appeal to people who are bootstrapping, again, people who are kind of building their side hustle or are starting up with just obviously $100 to get started with. In his book, he says that there are 3 things that you should do yourself while you're bootstrapping, like what you're good at, what the world needs, and what people will pay you money for. Would you agree with that? And,
Yeah.
like if so, what degree of work do I need to do as the entrepreneur versus things that I can outsource? Or is the ultimate goal to outsource everything and just make money?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I am a through and through bootstrapper. I really believe in building a business organically, building a business profitably, and just inching up. I have bootstrapped. This is now my 3rd business that I've bootstrapped, and funding is fantastic, but I feel that you have more control by doing it organically. So having said that, though, I believe there is a big difference between building a long-term, sustainable, scalable organization rather than the side gigs, the side hustles. I think that if you ask everyone doing a side gig and a side hustle, what is your ambition in 5 years from now? Do you want to still be a solopreneur earning a little bit on the side, or do you want to be Bill Gates with 135,000 staff? Generally, the ambition of people is to build a sustainable organization. Now, that doesn't really need to take more money, but it takes an early stage architecture about how am I going to set this up? What are the management philosophies that I'm going to employ to make sure that this is effective and scalable? And use like any of the books like Holacracy, E-Myth, Good to Great, Maverick, Start with Why. All of these sort of management fundamentals that we read and feel that we should apply in America or to our own home office should really just apply to how we build our first part-time VA, our first staffing, and then build that operational structure. So yeah, sorry, I went a little bit broad there, but you want to know about specifically the functions to get people to do?
So bring it home for us a little bit. If, I'm hiring my first VA, and so far I'm at that breaking point where, I'm doing everything myself and I'm working 10+ hour days and it's super stressful. What's the first thing that I should outsource? Like, what's the first thing? I know I need help because I'm drowning. What do I do to stop drowning?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's sort of simple to say in that there are left-hand tasks and right-hand tasks. The left-hand tasks are those that you are doing that are easy to replicate and are highly repeated throughout your workday or work week. Okay, so this is very mundane stuff. It might be scraping leads. It might be looking for new properties. It might be going through a process that you do that you can create a process and get someone else to do instead. Those are really fantastic roles that you should get done by a virtual assistant or someone that can just be working those roles for you. They can do anything like calling realtors, checking on stock, scraping the realtor sites. They can be looking for the best loans, the best facilities. They can be looking around for below market value properties. All of those things can be done by those simple tasks. Then the right-hand tasks are things that you don't necessarily have skills for, training for yourself, and they can be hired then to start building the sophistication and size and breadth of your business so that you're starting to add skills in.
I've had a lot of experience with Upwork. That's kind of been like my go-to for most of the things that I need, unless it's like just a one-off, really cheap job. I might go to Fiverr or something like that. But Upwork is I just kind of rely on it a lot right now. And I'm just curious, like, do you like Upwork? Like, what do you think the pros and cons are to that particular platform? And are there like some alternatives out there, like some other places I should be looking?
Great question.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And look, Upwork, and I credit the success of Upwork and the evolution of this business to Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week. He popularized VA, and it's also Chris Ducker. But there is so much more out there. Upwork is good, but it is really an open market, and it's not very structured, and there's not a lot of support with it. Outsourcing is professionalized services, and a part of outsourcing is that there are outsourcing suppliers which help become a partner with you and then provide the staffing. So there is a whole world. We list 630 outsourcing suppliers that employ about 1.2 million people, and they are doing everything from CAD drawings to architecture to CPAs and accountants, and the basic customer service and any of the VA work that you want doing. These are within professionalized environments. These BPO suppliers help you identify the role that you want, then identify the person that fits that role. So that's pretty much like a standard recruitment process. Then they bring them in, they take them through their standard vetting procedure, they give them medicals, they sign them up with all of the government taxes and dues, they give them health insurance, they sit them into an A-grade office in the center of Manila or one of the other centers, and then they turn up to work every 9 in the morning or whatever their shift is, and it's a professionalized environment. They have oversight. You as a client have account management, so that there's kind of a co-parenting aspect, and then you start to build the process that you are getting your role to do. So it's more of a long-term view. There's more sort of upfront investment, not money necessarily, but in terms of time, conveying your company's mission, your values, your processes over to this person. But after you do that, it's far more sustainable and scalable.
Something that has been like part of the reason that I use Upwork is because, I guess first of all, it's the one I know about, but also like it's a pretty decent place to find people who, you post a job and a bunch of people will bid on that. I've also found it really helpful as like a payment platform, like where I can, the people that I hire can sort of log their hours there. The payments are made automatically. It even like tracks their screen to make sure they're working and all that stuff. Just having a lot of that stuff built in has been really helpful to me. I know it's not cheap, like for both me and especially not for the person who's getting paid. I think up until they hit a certain point, like up to 20% of their payments are taken from them, and then it's 10%, and then it's 5%. It's kind of expensive. So I understand how Upwork makes money, and I understand the value proposition they have. With some of these other platforms out there, like how do they make money? Do they like make money one time when I choose to hire somebody, or is it kind of like Upwork where they continually make money from the ongoing relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So without doubt, the BPO service providers that I mentioned are more expensive. They're a more expensive route, but it is far more sustainable. Generally, people on Upwork, they have a kind of 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back. You find a great person, then they leave or they eventually disappoint you. And then, you're spending the next kind of week testing and finding a new person, and kind of like hopping forwards, hopping back. The outsourcing suppliers, the way that they work, effectively, you establish the role that you want, and they hire for that. No one makes any money on the salary that goes to that person. But then there is a BPO fee that you pay per month that goes to the outsourcing supplier. Now, think of them a little bit like WeWork, okay? So you get an employee, they sit within the facilities of WeWork, for example, and you pay them a monthly fee for the desk, for the facilities. But where an outsourcing supplier sort of then diverges, they also offer HR and recruitment. They basically co-manage the employee, and then the employee is, of course, on their books, so that at the end of the month, you just pay an aggregated one invoice that covers all of those expenses that are completely itemized. The cost differential is, you generally, as I mentioned, you pay a salary of about $400 to, let's say, $600 is the range of relatively standard salaries. The BPO fee as well will be about $500 to $600 per month. But that is because you are in then A-grade facilities, you've got the recruitment. But also what people don't realize is in Upwork, these people are 95% of the time not paying their government contributions. They don't have health insurance, and everyone's just really kind of flying by the seat of the pants. So when you go into an employment market where people aren't necessarily by the books, a lot of them are university students, a lot of them try out work for a little time and then it doesn't really work, you're not getting the best in class. And that's why you get that 2 steps forward, 2 steps back thing. When you come to a proper facility, you do pay more, but over the medium term, you certainly save more money and you're far more efficient with your business.
Mm-hmm. How do you, when you finally land the company that, helps you find the right person and it's the right fit, how do you go through the process of vetting that person and training them? What is your suggestion? Because I used to have a saying where, if you are familiar with the Lorax, it's a little kid's story by Dr. Seuss. And the Lorax, he says, "Oh, I speak for the trees." Like, I like to speak for the newbies. I like to speak for the people who are just getting started, who don't really know. This is all really great stuff, but it's kind of at a high level. And my heart is to just kind of bring it down to their level so that what are their next practical steps, right? So, when they find somebody, how do they hire, how do they train them for what they need to do? If they've never been an entrepreneur and this, let's say they started a land business on the side and it's grown to the point where they need to hire some extra help, what does that process even look like, especially overseas? Because I think that's one of the biggest fears that people have with virtual assistants is am I going to give this guy my social security number and my bank information? And is he going to check, if he's my bookkeeper? It's a lot of information. So dive into, I know that's kind of a lot of different topics there, but how do we get into training and then trusting the people that we hire overseas?
Well, and actually, even before that, how do you know you're getting the right person?
Yeah.
There's just, and those are totally loaded questions, I know, but
no, I'm up for it. I'm up for it, guys. So, I find that, especially if it's first-time employers, there is a big learning curve when you are starting to employ a team. Whether you are doing it in your hometown, they're sitting next to you, or whether it's remote. So there's a lot to learn about delegation, about managing people, about onboarding people, and also about recruiting people. If you recruit people 100 times a week, you're going to get a lot better at it. If you have never recruited someone before, and then you recruit someone every 10 years, you're always going to be a little bit kind of amateur. And that's fine because life is busy. But, outsourcing suppliers, for example, they might have a continual rolling recruitment requirement of maybe 2,000 people a month. So they get very good at recruiting. But just going down to the base level, establish what you need, what role you need to do. You can create a job spec, or you can also now go online and look for job specs that match kind of almost what you need. And then you can tweak that template to exactly what you feel you need. What I would suggest is, people kind of want everything done. The most incredible experienced generalist that can handle every single task that they've ever dreamt of. That, if it doesn't happen in the US, then it probably won't happen in the Philippines. First of all, start relatively simple. Start with those left-hand roles that are easy to replicate and are relatively confined into one sort of broad skill set. So if you want someone writing articles, they're probably not going to be so good at data scraping, and they're probably not going to be so good at sales, okay? Because they take sort of slightly different people, personality types.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So start with one sort of confined skill set, and then basically seek to hire that person. You know, there are people that write entire books on recruiting and hiring and things like that. You know, what I think you can take away is if you have an outsourcing supplier, a partner, they have been through this many, many times before. They already have a pool of people. They are experts in hiring, recruiting, and they can do 95% of the legwork for you. And then you then come in and do Skype calls, interviews. You can even give them tests or give them whatever processes you want. I hope that's kind of answered that. In terms of onboarding people, in terms of getting them up to speed of what you want to do, there is really no getting around it. You can now get people that are experienced in real estate, in US real estate, in the various functions that you're after. You can certainly get people involved, experienced in digital marketing and CPA, bookkeeping, accounting. So if you want anything like that, but if you have specific processes, if you have a specific company requirement, then what you have to do is really just map out those processes and those roles. Now, this is where the upfront investment comes in, because it's time where you have to go, hey, all of this is in my head. I know what I'm doing, but how do I get it out of my head into a process and then get it into their head? Okay. And so that is a process that I think first time employers take for granted, but also, people that then struggle to delegate. There are those sort of apprehensions and limitations as well. But this is, I've been in business like 25 years, and these learnings never really go away. So I think the message is just kind of get started, and you will get better at that. But don't undervalue the importance basically of the upfront onboarding. And it's no more complicated than really just explaining your processes, explaining your company, but also building a connection and building a relationship with them, because these are people too. They're excited about working with you, but also they want to know if there's a career ladder, if there's potential to upskill, and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's why in my job description, I always put must be able to read Seth's mind, because I don't want to have to explain all this stuff. They just have to know what I want all the time.
Yeah, that's why I'm the only one that's ever worked for REtipster, because I got Jedi powers.
Yeah.
Derek, you
So
mentioned
it is kind of a one step back. It's about getting that foundation strong. We also suggest that, because I truly believe that, and especially at sort of whatever, like $500 a month, there is an incredible opportunity to grow, to out-strategize your competitors, to out-compete, to find new markets, to launch new products. So the ambition is, in theory, to grow a bit of an organization, an operational structure, and a hierarchy. And there is a little bit of need at the beginning to set the foundations. One of the common approaches is to hire a pioneer. They're called a pioneer because they are slightly more senior. You spend more time with those people, but once you have them on board and knowledgeable, then they can start hiring people under them that then they do all the legwork. They tell you about REtipster. They tell you about the processes that Seth likes, so that as you build a team, it isn't Seth in the middle reaching out to this VA, talking about that, reaching out to the other VA, talking about that, recruiting the next person, training the last person that left after a month, because you're going to get really tired doing that. And it's about creating a structure that's more sustainable and scalable.
That's actually really good to know. I didn't realize that was a thing. That's I can totally see huge value behind having somebody like that who can kind of speak on my behalf and convey that to other people.
For sure.
You mentioned earlier, just kind of in passing, that there are websites out there that have these like job spec templates that you can tweak to your own purposes. Where can we find some of those? Is there a particular website that has those?
Yeah, again, going back to the international employment, just go on to whatever's in the US, like Seek or Indeed or Monster, and find your perfect candidate and say, I want that. There are also job sites in the Philippines. There is Indeed here, which is now internationalized. There's Caliber. I was with the founder of Caliber. I think they have, about 1.5 million job candidates on there. There is onlinejobs.ph. So all of these, provide insight into the skills and prices that you want to look for.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So let's say you find a VA or whatever you want to call it, pioneer, or somebody that you choose to work with. And, I know everybody's going to make mistakes. Like that's a totally thing that you should plan on. But like, how do you know if a VA just isn't working out? Like, are there telltale signs that like, okay, this person, they should not be working for me. It's time to let them go. I mean, that's a big decision to like cut somebody loose like that. So like, how do you know when they're just making human mistakes versus like, okay, they are not the right fit?
Sure. Like one of the management fundamental, people say is hire slow, fire fast. Just spend upfront time, but then just read the signals. And you have to weigh up: is it a competency issue? Is it a experience issue? Is it an onboarding issue? Or is it sort of a contextual issue? Look, absolutely, no one is, I'm not saying outsourcing is perfect. There are good people and bad people, just like the US labor pool. And I think that you'll generally get a sense whether, attitude, is the person turning up on time? Is the person highly reliable? Competency, do they generally know what you are talking about? And have they got experience in that? Are they doing the homework they need to catch up? When you give them the processes, the onboarding, are they reading through it? Are they really doing the work they need to get on top of this quickly? And at the start, it's best to spend time on Zoom calls like this or Skype, having video so that you can see them, see their environment, and generally, despite being a few thousand miles away, look into the whites of their eyes, and it's just like any other interaction, and you'll really know whether this person is clicking onto it or not. What I do recommend is, with real estate, there is an aspect of cultural relevance. These are some of the hardest things to outsource, because if I asked you, Seth, to sort of give us a guided tour around the Manila, then you wouldn't know where to start because there's not a lot of cultural anchors. And so if you talk about the ice boxes in the garage of a house, or the sort of common housing layouts that you have in your neighborhood, they probably, they don't have firsthand knowledge of this. So those kind of cultural anchors can hold someone back. So try not to sort of create roles where that is the key aspect of the role, because that could almost take 1 or 2 years for someone really to get warmed up on the cultural nuances of those things.
We had somebody on our podcast. His name is Perry Marshall, and he wrote the book on 80/20 sales and marketing. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, absolutely. I've read the book. Yeah.
Okay, cool. He mentions something in that book that I'd never thought of before, but it made a lot of sense, where, one way to go about hiring the right person, like a virtual assistant, would be to take one job and hire out, like, just as an example, hire out 10 people to do the exact same job, and then find the 2 who did the best job and hire one of them, as opposed to like, asking these questions that everybody knows the right answer to, and then just kind of picking somebody and, okay, I hope this works. Do you think I'd never heard of that or even thought of that idea until I read that. Do you think that's a good idea? Is that a bad idea? What would you say?
Look, there are different approaches, absolutely. And again, I would suggest that it doesn't differ too much to the US. And, generally that doesn't happen. I think 10 is a bit extreme, but very commonly you can get 2 or 3 people for a role, and see how they fare. Absolutely. But, like you can't understate the amount of work and cost there is to that. Because, and again, it depends on the role, but if you're onboarding these people, there's a lot of time investment there. And I really wouldn't expect anyone to perform without any proper onboarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. But, again, the outsourcing suppliers, they have recruitment specialists, HR specialists. They can do aptitude tests. These people are experienced in, if you are a big account and you need 1,000 people by next week, they could onboard 1,000 people. So these are the outsourcing experts that can actually help build a team for you. But yeah, there's certainly different approaches. But I would suggest, how do you kind of nail it in the US, and then it's not that different kind of thing.
So going back to cultural differences, I'm sure that Filipinos have different cultural communication styles, and I'm just curious your insights on how to navigate, like, for an example, let's say that, and I don't know if this is true or not, but let's just say that Filipinos have a cultural element where if you give them constructive criticism and they're going to respond with, yes, boss, no problem. That's awesome. Yeah. And they don't actually they're inside actually really mad or angry or about to quit on you, but you don't know how to read that as, say, an American. How do you navigate and establish kind of an international culture within your business when you have so many different cultural elements at play?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on there, and it's a great question, because this is where a lot of I think first-time outsourcing people kind of there's a lot of with culture. There's a lot of nuances. Nothing is totally different, but there's just a lot of little differences. They do communicate differently. They have different cultural relevancies and backgrounds. Their English is generally great. And, bear in mind, they're also brought up on YouTube and Netflix. So they're totally into your culture, but then they are generally more quiet. They're a lot more meek. They respect hierarchy and authority a lot more. So they'll probably continually call you sir, even though you ask them not to call you sir. They will struggle to question you, and say, look, I don't think this is the right route. You generally would not get that. If you ask opinions, then they would probably give the opinion that they feel is, you want to hear. So there are absolutely these nuances, and it's a little bit like learning a new language. You cannot get this overnight. The only way that you do get it is by practice and, just sort of slowly building a team and moving on. But, again, this is where the process mapping, KPIs, so key performance indicators, because, again, this is slightly cultural in that, the whole Silicon Valley startups, people working in garages, it's everyone kind of in it for themselves. They know what they're doing. Whereas outsourcing, they actually prefer, look, tell me what I'm doing today. Tell me these processes. Tell me what a good result is. And I will be so happy to do that, outperform and please you. Whereas I think the millennials, or in the US, people will just be rolling their eyes and going, oh my God, this is all I'm doing. But in the Philippines, they actually prefer that structure. And, in the early days, while you get to know each other, it's about spending a lot of time with each other on the phone, knowing each other's sort of communication nuances, but then just being very clear in terms of what you want, the requirements, and then repeating it to make sure that there's understanding. As you get to know each other, then the relationship broadens and you get more done, basically.
So what about like holidays and time off, like structuring? Because I know that I think it was actually Chris Ducker in his book mentioned that in the Philippines, they have obviously different national holidays and different things than we do here in the US. So when you structure you structure the working relationship internationally, do you recognize their holidays or your holidays? What do you do with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, just so the Philippines has been outsourcing now for the last 25 years. They are so used to working the US shifts, the US holidays, the US working days. So absolutely no problem. It is just a part of the hiring and recruitment. You set expectations from the start. You say, look, I want you working whatever my time zone is, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and I want you working on my work days, and you have the US holidays off. That is absolutely no problem at all. It is so common here in the Philippines, and there are entire sort of IT tech business parks here in the Philippines. You walk around at 3 a.m, and it's like daytime in New York. You know, it's just flooded with people having their lunch, because there is such a huge economy based around serving US clients. So it's absolutely normalized, but set expectations from the start with that, and no problem at all. You do have to pay, like there are night shift loadings, there are public holiday loadings and things like that. But you know, when you're talking about a salary of whatever $400 a month, it really doesn't add up to anything significant.
That's really good to know. For some reason, I always had it in my head that with the different time zone, like they'd just be working through the night. I just kind of had to deal with that. But I guess I didn't realize that that's not the norm necessarily. So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like absolutely, they you know, and with technology, the time differences is something we can never get away from. It's probably the only thing in the world that won't be eradicated by technology, actually. So the Philippines is very used to working through the night. Of course, it is about a 12-hour difference with the Philippines. But again, you know, bear in mind, these are people. They have their own needs. They have families. So you know, some flexibility is ideal, and then they will really build loyalty if you're flexible and some things like that. But you know, certainly from the start, say, look, I'm a US company. I want these hours. These are our holidays, and this is a part of the job to be there as I need you. And then so that's setting the foundation from the start.
Yeah. Okay. I actually recently read a book called The New 1 Minute Manager. Are you familiar with that book?
No, I haven't read that one.
Okay. Well, I just thought it did a really good job at helping me understand the context of how to effectively manage people, because
Is that what you do with me, man? Is that where you get all your tactics?
Yeah, that's all the tricks that I use on you from that book. But yeah, I mean, this is something I've never really done a lot of until probably a couple of years ago. And I don't know, I just, do you know of any books that are helpful at, correcting a person's mindset or getting them just to think through how to manage people adequately? Do you know of any good resources out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible skill set, you know, and it's something that I am refining all the time. You know, when I was very young, I read Maverick by Ricardo Semler. I don't know if you've read that, but that is about basically a free organization where you treat everyone like adults. You treat them all pretty autonomously, and you expect them, on the other hand, to perform and give you their best and act like the professionals that you're hiring. That had a huge impact on me as a kid. And then the other end of the spectrum is E-Myth. I'm not sure if you've read E-Myth, but that is a very well-known book about setting processes, about having a very visible structure and hierarchy and structure to the business. The two books are almost polar opposites in that one is very unstructured. You are adults, you know what you're doing. I am hiring you to show me. And then E-Myth is almost like the McDonald's worker, where you don't allow them to even make any mistakes because the process is there in place. So there's certainly two books that gave me a lot to think about, both in terms of processes, but also in terms of enabling people to perform.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very cool. Well, what do you think, Jan? Is there anything else we should talk? Derek, is there any big things we should know about before we move on to our final three questions, or have we kind of
final three? No, absolutely. Look, there's a lot you can talk about in this, but really it is just about getting started. You will know 100x more after 3 months of giving it a go. And that isn't a sales pitch, but it's a bit like learning a language. And once you get in there, you realize the Philippines isn't so scary. The cultural differences aren't so broad. Even employing people, even delegating, those skills aren't so scary. So it's really just getting people onto that journey. And then they realize that the opportunity for their business to just add rocket fuel is incredible. So that's what I suggest.
Great. No, that's a great perspective. Super helpful. So we've got the final three questions that we're going to run past you. They're pretty open-ended, so
they can get awkward sometimes.
Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with
tears. Tears.
So, question number one, Derek: what is your biggest fear?
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's to not succeed, really. I'm always pushing myself harder and harder, and but I always have in the back of my mind the fire under me is actually through the fear and not succeeding more than actually having an easy life. So I think that's what keeps me going.
I'm very similar. Yeah, I hear you.
Have you ever taken the Enneagram test, Derek?
No, I haven't.
No? Oh, okay.
Enneagram, it's really good.
Yeah, I can send you a link sometime. It's like a 5-minute free test. It's really quick, but like it'll give you insights that are like creepy. Like it's like they're reading your mind. How accurate, at least for me, that's how it was. And
yeah, me too.
You almost sound like a type 3 to me, but I'll be curious to see what you actually get if you take the test.
I'm a type 3, so he's not insulting you. Or maybe he is, I don't know.
No, it's a good thing.
So what is one of the things that you're most proud of in your life?
Yeah, it's really, my businesses are my babies. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's the building what I've built. And, I've been through the highs and lows of entrepreneurship, but really, pulling everything together really is a gargantuan task. So, certainly the previous business I had and now this business, it's kind of they're my babies, and I'm super proud.
That's awesome.
Cool. So last question: what is the most important lesson you've ever learned in life?
Wow. I think when I started life, I thought it was and I had a lot of early successes, that life is pretty easy and you just follow this path. And then I realized that it is so much more complicated, so many more undulations. There's this roller coaster going on. Life is not simple. And I think the biggest lesson really for me is that, it comes down to grit. There's not really any magical ingredients or factors or lucky rides. You've just got to really push this thing out, and you're not going to get through anything with any satisfaction unless you put in a huge amount of work and show grit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I agree.
It's a great lesson. Yeah, appreciate you sharing that. So if people want to learn more about Outsource Accelerator or anything you've got going on, do they just go to, outsourceaccelerator.com? Is that the website?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we've got 4,000 articles there, outsourceaccelerator.com. And of course, they can email me, which is my name, Derek, Derek, @outsourceaccelerator.com.
Cool. All righty. Well, thanks a lot, Derek. Appreciate it, man.
Amazing.
Yeah, if there's anything we can do to help you out, let me know. And appreciate connecting with you. If I'm ever in London or Manila, I'll shoot you an email. Maybe we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to help you guys as well if you want to expand the team or learn any more about outsourcing.
Awesome. Might take you up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just get in touch. Yeah, I can show you around and help you out however you need.
Awesome.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks again, man.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Bye. Bye.
So there you have it, folks. That was the entire interview with Derek Gallimore. If you want to check out the show notes for this episode, I know there's a lot of books and links and different things we mentioned. Head over to retipster.com/40. That's 40, because this is episode number 40. And you can see a big summary of all the stuff we talked about, along with the video and audio clip and the whole 9 yards. So, but with that said, if you happen to tune into a previous episode that we did, episode number 39, Jaron and I thought that we would, I don't know, just for fun, we would go through and answer those final 3 questions ourselves. So in episode 39, we answered the question of what is your biggest fear? So if you want to hear that, go check that out. It's right at the end. But today, we're going to talk about what are we most proud of? Jaron, you go first.
Yeah, man. No pressure. Yeah, so I actually did some thinking because I knew we were going to be asking this question. And hands down, the thing that I'm most proud of in my life is my marriage. And I think that all things considered, it's the thing that I am most successful at. It's not that it's like perfect in the sense that we never fight or anything like that. We're both very, very strong personalities, and we're very opinionated and get loud and all of that. But at the end of the day, my wife is actually my best friend before she's my wife. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a really rare thing. Like if I ever want to do anything fun, my idea of fun, there's no real idea of fun without her. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any secrets to a successful marriage. Like my marriage very much came out of kind of a really spiritual experience. And I won't get into all the details because I don't want to bore you guys with all that, but it just was a gift. It's just been a real gift for me. Like I knew my wife for 2 months before we got married. And I knew the moment I saw her that she was my wife. And 2 months later we got married, and it'll be approaching 8 years in July.
That's interesting having 2 strong personalities, being married to each other. Because when I look at myself, I don't know that I'd consider myself to be a strong personality. It doesn't mean I don't have strong opinions and stuff, but I'm just not like an in-your-face kind of person. Like I don't flip out and scream at you. If I don't know if that's how you guys are.
Yeah, I really wish I practice that all the time. I wish that I could just be quiet when I'm angry and just like give space. And I would much rather do awkward silences, but for the life of me, up until this point, I have not been able to master that skill. When I get mad, I'm like, bleh! I go Hulk.
Sounds productive.
It's not at all. I think the best and the worst comes out of you when you get married.
Yeah.
Probably even more so when you have children. But I've seen the best side of myself and the worst side of myself through my marriage. What about you, Seth?
Yeah. So for me, the words proud or pride, the things that come to mind, it's not like I'm prideful of it. It's because it's not like I deserve these things. It's more just like I'm very happy with these things. Like I'm very thankful for them. And the first thing that comes into my head is my kids, because man, they're 2 amazing people. Like I don't know how we got so fortunate. They're just like, they're so cute and they're obedient. They're good listeners. Like they just have good hearts. And granted, they're only 2 and 4 right now. So life is still very simple. I'm sure it'll get much more complicated as they get older, but yeah, I just feel like they're both a gift from God. And it's amazing that God saw fit to put them in our lives. Ultimately they're his children, but we get to be their parents. And it's just a really cool thing that we had that opportunity. So that's probably number 1. Really, I was actually reflecting on this a couple months ago that right now I think is probably the happiest I've ever been in my life, just in terms of like, it is very hard for me to look at anything right now and complain about it. I know I do anyway. You hear me complain sometimes. but like, honestly, like when I look at the things that really matter, I mean, everything is handled right now, which it has not always been that way, not by a long shot. There's been a lot of hills and valleys in my past and, just my career and different things I've done. And it's just a really cool thing to be able to see where I'm at right now and realize like, this is about as good as it's ever been. And to not have that be lost on me. Like I see it, I understand it, and I appreciate it, and I'm content. And a lot of people, I feel like it's given to them and they never really realize it. They don't take the time to appreciate it, and it comes and it's gone one day, and they never jump for joy about how great their life was. So yeah, I mean, when I just look at like the place we live, the business I get to run every day, I mean, the people I get to work with, my wife, my kids, I mean, it's just like everybody's healthy at this point. Like nobody's got any life-threatening illnesses. And that's an amazing thing to be in a place in life where it's all kind of there. And ultimately at the same time, I think it's almost kind of a challenge to realize these things on the surface, quote unquote success and like having the money you need and all this stuff. What if that gets taken away from you someday? Is your joy going to go out the window? Because is that like where all your hope is tied to? Is these things that are inherently temporary? Like it will not always be like this. I know that. So it's an interesting challenge in my mind to be happy with it on one hand, but also to realize like, this is not my identity. This is not where the core of my joy lives. Like there's something going on beyond this. So yeah, but that's my long-winded answer.
It's awesome, man. I really like doing this. I'm kind of sad that there's only 3 questions and we're done next episode, but
you're gonna have to Google thought-provoking questions or something.
What is the meaning of life?
Have you ever seen those conversation starter decks of cards? Like it's kind of like a deck of cards, but every card is just like a question. And I think the idea is like, if you're sitting around the table with a bunch of people you don't know, or even like a bunch of people you do know, and everybody's just quiet, nobody has anything to talk about. It's just every card is a very interesting question that gets everybody thinking. Like, what is the best trip you ever went on in your life? Or what's the biggest mistake you ever made? What's a lie you've never told anybody the truth about?
What's the most embarrassing moment ever? No, hey, I don't know what your thoughts are, but we should do something like that on the show after, I don't know, depends on what the audience wants and everything, but I think that would be really cool to get a deck of cards that has those conversation starters, and we just pick one at random at the end of every show and just do like a 10-minute, 15-minute dialogue. My
cousin actually, I interviewed her once on the YouTube channel. Her name is Becky Hammond. She runs a site called Isogo Strong. It's all about like strengths finder things and how to find your core strengths and use those in your business. But anyway, she, I think it's like one of the things she sells in her store is those little decks of cards. So maybe I can buy one from her and we can start going through it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But cool, man. Well, anything else we should cover or talk about before we wrap this one up?
No, I think that was it. I really am just thankful, man, that I get to do this with you. Of all people, it's I'm a pretty lucky guy. So
yeah, I'm lucky to have you on the team, and I'm glad we get to do this, man. I can't think of many people I'd rather work with, so I'm glad you're here.
Oh man, we should get matching.
You crying yet?
Yeah, we should get matching T-shirts that say "I'm with my BFF." You know.
Dear listener, thank you for sticking with us. I hope you got something out of that interview with Derek. Appreciate having your eyes and ears. Eyes if you're watching on YouTube, ears if you're listening. And we will talk to you again in the next episode. See you next time.